Hello and welcome to the We Got It podcast. We're your hosts, Jonah and Abby, and we are here for our post-selection show episode. Best time of year for basketball for Michigan State. We have a lot of good, content coming for you this episode. We're going to start with doing kind of a brief preview of the first round matchup versus North Dakota State.
That's crazy.
And then we are going to...
That's in like 3 days.
Then we are going to be joined by none other than Dr. Green and White, Paul Fanson, to kind of look at Michigan State's draw overall in the East region, how it stacks up maybe historically for other 3 seeds, how it would have maybe stacked up versus Michigan State if they would have held on to a 2 seed out west. So a lot to cover.
Many numbers. We're going to get into all of them. Try to keep them in a format that if you're like me, you can understand, because I don't do good with numbers. And Jonah, you forgot to introduce our little good luck charm over here. This is Mr. Kenny Goins Walker III. Is our little cat. We couldn't decide what Spartan to name him after, so it's Kenneth Kenny.
And what other better year to have a cat named Kenny when Michigan State and Duke are in the East region, potentially together, playing in Washington, D.C. Maybe we'll see a repeat of history from 2019. You never know.
I'd rather not have to play them, but like if we're going to, then yes, I would like a repeat of history from 2019. Nice little Jordan Scott 3 over whoever their biggest defender is.
But as always, the We Got It podcast is an official podcast of Spartans Illustrated, and we have a lot of great content over there right now, just with March Madness, kind of coverage of the selection show, previewing things.
You will not go hungry there.
Yeah, so head over on to Spartans Illustrated, subscribe if you haven't already to make sure that you don't miss any of the great...
We'll have it linked right down below, super easy.
...content. But yeah, let's kind of get into this first round matchup against the Bison of North Dakota.
And I'm going to be totally honest, and I think I'm probably not alone in the Spartan fan base here, in that the only thing that I know about the Bison is that they are from North Dakota and that their colors are green and white.
Yeah.
And that they're a 14 seed. And I believe, you and I, we were trying to do a little bit of scouting into them earlier today, and I gave up quickly. And at one point you were like, I can't find any film of them.
Yeah.
Like, there is more information and film on their women's team, which everybody watches women's sports, heck yeah. But there's more information on their women's team than on the men's basketball team. But it sounds like you were a little bit successful.
Yeah, I found some info for sure.
I know nothing. Tell me what I need to know about this matchup.
Yeah, so North Dakota State is, I believe, 114th on Ken Pom.
So just like overall ranking in the country.
Yes.
And a reminder for people who are like me, or like math doesn't math. There's 68 teams in the tournament. They're 100 and what? 14th? Whatever you said?
114th, yeah.
Conference tournament champions are the reason that people can jump up that.
Yes, automatic qualifiers. Yes.
Okay.
Which is actually a little bit higher than a typical 14 seed.
Classic.
Would be, and they're actually higher on Ken Pom than even some of the 13 seeds.
Fantastic.
I think they're directly kind of 2 or 3 spots above Hawaii, who's a 13 seed. Awesome. But overall, definitely an interesting team. They are a team that hasn't played a single team in the top 100 of Ken Pom. And I think the best team they've played is St. Thomas, who was kind of just north of 100 in Ken Pom, and they lost by 20 points to them on the road. I believe that was their only quad 2 game all season. So their level of competition has not been good.
It's just so hard, because then you're comparing apples and oranges. Like, it's just so hard to know how any of these teams are going to stack up. And again, that's the beauty of the tournament.
Yeah.
But it doesn't do a lot to soothe my soul, because I don't know what we're talking
about.
But
when you look at a team like North Dakota State, they're trying to pull up their record here. They are 27-7, which means since they've only played one quad 1 or quad 2 team, they have 6 quad 3/4 losses.
Okay.
Where for Michigan State, I don't believe they have a loss outside of quad 1.
Right.
So that's definitely a data point that you can pretty definitively point to and say, like...
And again, the quad rankings are based off of the net rankings, right? Which is kind of this weird, like, arbitrary 1 through 300 and however many teams there are ranking system, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say arbitrary. It's just kind of the NCAA's official ranking sorting tool that they use. And the primary use for that is to kind of put those games in quadrants.
I guess when I say arbitrary, it's like sometimes who someone is or what position a team is ranked at doesn't really make any sense, and it doesn't necessarily align with like AP poll or Ken Pom or Bart Torvik.
Yeah, I would say it probably usually aligns closer to some of those advanced metrics. But yeah, sometimes there are anomalies where a team will be higher or lower on the net than typical. But like I said, for North Dakota State, kind of the biggest thing that stood out to me is even a non-conference play,
right.
Not playing a single 100, top 100 team. And kind of when watching just some of their game film from their Summit League championship against North Dakota, and then also their regular season finale, also against North Dakota, a couple things stood out to me. I think overall they're a team that has pretty good ball movement. It doesn't look like they're trying to win one-on-one a lot. They're trying to get to that second passer to get those open looks, maybe drive to the hoop, and then kick it outside. But I saw a lot of clean, crisp passing, some good, I think, just court vision from a lot of their players. But the other thing that stood out to me is they are not a very big team, especially in their playing rotation. And this is kind of something that you hear kind of...
Not a very, like, big, tall team, or not
tall.
A very deep team?
Either.
Well, both. Okay.
Yeah.
Their tallness also does not go into their depth.
But big meaning, like, their size
okay.
their length.
I got you. The rotation threw me off, but I understand what you're saying now.
And it's kind of a metric that gets thrown out a lot, is, like, what a team's average size is. And it's not always the most accurate way to look at a team's size, because that accounts for all 15 players on a roster. And if you've got 2 7-footers that don't play...
Nick Sanders and Steven Izzo sitting on your bench.
Well, yeah, it could go either way. But their starting rotation is 6 foot, 6'2", 6'2", 6'3",
interesting,
6'6", and 6'9". Whereas Michigan State, you got Carson Cooper, who is... I was
going to say, he's going to be
6'11",
out there feeling like Mara.
You got Jackson Kohler, 6'9", and then Cohen Carr, 6'6".
So everybody's got like a 2-inch, 3-inch height advantage on their matchup. Yeah,
especially at those forward positions. They really play 4 guards and kind of not a huge forward in their starting rotation. So I think this is a game Michigan State can really pound it inside. I think... this could be a game where both Cooper and Kohler really have...
As we've talked about, having points in the paint, I think, is huge for the Spartans. And I think that's something we didn't talk about after the UCLA loss, is that they were, 5 for 17 from, layup?
Yeah, it wasn't pretty.
And, I mean, I think that speaks for itself a lot when you look at that loss. So that encourages me of, having the advantage in the paint and being able to use that.
I also don't think North Dakota State's a super athletic team, and when you mix that and kind of their lack of size, I think Cohen Carr is going to be an extremely difficult matchup for them, because you either have to kind of go into your bench to get more size, or you have to play an undersized forward, somebody who's 6'3", on Cohen Carr, who's maybe not a great athlete, and I think he's somebody that could really have a big game, especially in transition.
I'm counting on at least one windmill dunk and then just a reverse nasty.
I mean, at this point, it's given, no matter who the opponent is, to be honest. But yeah, that's kind of initially just maybe by the eye test what I kind of noticed from North Dakota State. I do think they have some pretty solid guard play. Their leading scorer is Damari Wheeler-Thomas, who's been averaging 14.4 points a game, shooting 38.5% from 3, which is a pretty high mark. Overall, their 3-point shooting as a team is like nothing that's going to like necessarily pop out as crazy to you. I think according to Bart Torvik, they are like 91st in 3-point percentage and like 170th, I think, in 3-point rate.
Okay.
So they're kind of an average team as far as how much they shoot the three, and then kind of an upper third of a team in the country is how well they shoot it. But if you look a little bit deeper on their roster, they have 4 guys in their rotation. They probably are going to play 7 guys, maybe 8 to 9, but maybe those guys probably are going to play a handful of minutes. But really, 7 guys are going to be in their rotation. 4 of those guys shoot at least 38% from 3 or better. And that's really the path to victory I see for North Dakota State, with just some of their lack of size, with their maybe lack of athleticism.
I don't like hearing those words in the same sentence. I'm glad we're talking about it so I can be mentally prepared, but I don't like hearing
But, I mean, you look on again, initially that might be scary.
I know what you're saying.
But then you look at, like, this is a team that's going to have to
being difficult over here.
Shoot more threes than they normally do, and make more threes than they normally do to have a chance in this game.
And again, all of that is assuming, right? Like, this team has never played a top 100 team. Like, all of this is assuming that they can continue that same rate against a Tom Izzo defense.
Yes, against a top 12 defense.
Now, if it's a Tom Izzo defense, which I would argue is not a Tom Izzo defense that showed up against UCLA down in Chicago on Friday, they might have an easier time of it and might not really feel like they're playing too much outside what they're used to. However, I don't see a world in which that defense shows up again in the first round, or I would really argue in the NCAA tournament, again, if Tom Izzo has anything to say about it. And I think, frankly, if the players have anything to say about it, I think all of them were pretty clear, like, where their lapses were and the fact that they had lapses after that UCLA game.
Yeah, with Michigan State, like, that is definitely a concern heading into the tournament, how they've been defending the three in their last couple of games, going back to the Michigan game and they're against the finale, and then against UCLA. So it will be interesting to see how they adjust to that, trying to make improvements. Because I think that it's going to be key, especially if Michigan State is going to kind of progress in the tournament and play tougher and tougher teams, especially a team potentially like Louisville in the second round, who is also a team that from the 3-point range, it can be pretty scary.
Yeah.
Maybe with some more variance, but again, like,
has the
you never want to be on the bad side of that variance, you know.
Yeah.
So Michigan State definitely needs to improve on their 3-point shooting. But this isn't a North Dakota State team that screams elite 3-point shooting team. I think they'd have to win with the style of play that they haven't really played yet this year, while also probably losing the rebounding battle by quite a lot, and having a tough time stopping Michigan State in the paint. So it's, again, you never want to say never with these games, or anything's guaranteed. But I think this is a game that Michigan State should have enough advantages, where even if North Dakota State does hit 12, 13 threes, that Michigan State can still come away with a victory. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it. If for some reason this game is an upset, the name to watch for North Dakota State is Tay Smith.
Does it have to be an upset for that to be a name to watch? Can we just like watch him and appreciate him and then send him home?
I mean, I guess. But he's the guy that comes off the bench, only averages about just under 8 points a game. But he has hit 8 threes in a game this year. He's hit 7 threes in a game this year. He's hit 5 a couple times, 6 once.
Which means the games that he's not scoring, he's not scoring at all.
Right.
If he's only averaging 8 points, that's crazy.
I think he was 2 for 10 from 3 in their opening conference tournament game. There's a couple games where I think he was 1 for 11.
Yeah.
So a pretty volatile shooter. I think overall this season he's still shooting about 39%, which is really, really good. But it hasn't always been consistent. It's kind of some of those great performances I think are helping his numbers. But definitely a name to watch for. If North Dakota State is going to make this game interesting, I think he'll have to definitely get involved.
Yeah. And not to get too ahead of things, because we're going to have time, again, knock on wood, hopefully, that we get through the North Dakota State matchup. We'll have another episode out for you guys previewing what that next matchup looks like. It's favored, obviously, to be Louisville, and that's going to be another team. We'll talk about it more with Dr. Green and White later. Just problematic. They have the opportunity to, I think, depending on how they show up that night and how Michigan State shows up that night, if, again, when we get there, if we get there, to just be really problematic for Michigan State. Here's what I think about, and maybe I'm too optimistic, which is not something I can normally say about myself, especially this time of year. I just think the Big Ten is just brutal. Like, you look at, Purdue was the number 7th seed in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
And they ended up as the number 8th seed overall in the country.
Yeah.
The number 2 seed. Like, I think that says a lot about the kind of grit and just like knockdown, drag out fights that is Big Ten play. And this is what gets me excited about the tournament, is seeing like how teams from mid-majors, from the ACC, from the Big East, I think SEC is pretty gritty too in a lot of ways. Parts of the Big 12 as well. Like, I just don't know how, maybe the fancy boys down from Louisville can hang with like a gritty
physical Michigan State team. I think it's a great point.
And again, maybe I'm being way too optimistic and I'm going to eat my words come Saturday. I hope not. But I think there's these like intangibles, right? I don't know if that's the right word. I know I'm using them a little bit different maybe than how Anthony Garbert did, but just these things that you just can't put a number on. Like, you can't. We were talking to Jackson Kohler's dad about this. Like, you can't put on a stat sheet or put into an analytic what it feels like to have Jackson's shoulder in your chest. Like, you can't grade how hard it is when you fall on the ground because you were going up against Carson Cooper for a rebound. And so I think that's the part of NCAA tournament play that I'm excited to see. And I think that's something that certainly North Dakota State has not probably faced much of. And I'm curious if we get there, if Louisville gets there, if that's something that Louisville's really even seen this season. We could keep talking forever, but we want to make sure we have time for our segment with Paul Fanson. Don't go anywhere, but we are going to get you caught up with a few halftime updates, and I'm going to turn it over to you for that.
Yes. Your men's team is not the only team that was dancing into March Madness, as the women's team also heard their name called on Sunday evening. They were selected as a 5 seed. And will start their tournament run in Norman, Oklahoma.
Just missing out on that opportunity to host, right?
I know, close, very close. But they will play Colorado State in their opening round.
Jeez, what's up with all the green and white teams playing each other?
Yeah, that's true.
Let us have some pride in our colors without cheapening it with our opponents. Come on, selection committee. You should be thinking about the colors.
But then they would potentially face off against Oklahoma in the second round, who is hosting that kind of pod this upcoming weekend as well. And then for men's hockey, they hosted the Big Ten semifinal this weekend against Ohio State, looking to also win their 3rd straight Big Ten tournament championship. Unfortunately, Ohio State just kind of had their number this year as they defeated the Spartans in overtime. So Michigan State will not be playing next weekend, but it does look pretty much all wrapped up that Michigan State will still earn a 1 seed in the NCAA hockey tournament that will start here in a couple weeks. That's really what this season is going to come down to, is how they do in that tournament, because I think while Big Ten tournament and Big Ten regular season championships mean a lot, this team hasn't quite gotten over the hump in the NCAA tournament and reached a Frozen Four. So that's definitely where the focus is going to be for this team.
Yeah, and especially for those seniors. And, we're going to be rooting for the Buckeyes this upcoming weekend in the Big Ten tournament. We don't need one more thing for U of M fans to hold over.
Well, don't go anywhere, as we are going to be joined by Paul Fanson here in just mere seconds, because you won't want to miss a segment.
Well, we are so honored to be joined by Paul Fanson, also known as Dr. Green and White, data analyst extraordinaire. Thanks so much for coming on, Paul. We're really excited to have you back again this season because it is now post-selection Sunday. And if you're anything like me, you're looking at all these teams and you have no idea what's going on. So thank you for being here and helping us understand all of this.
No problem. My pleasure. It's always great to see you guys. And I'm glad to be back to talk some bracketology and some March Madness, my favorite time of the year.
It's just crazy. And I think probably a lot of Spartan fans, if you weren't like checking bracketology stuff all day yesterday, were maybe a little bit surprised by the 3-seed draw for Michigan State. Walk Jonah and I through just like your immediate reactions, one to the Michigan State draw, but just like any of the other seeding lines that were of interest to you right after Selection Sunday show.
Yeah, I mean, I spent a unreasonable amount of time thinking about this over the weekend and the days leading up. And I ultimately wasn't surprised because the selection committee miraculously made the same decision that I would have had I been in their shoes. But it was kind of a wild ride over the weekend because, coming into, Friday at noon, I think the consensus was Michigan State was solidly on the 2-seed line.
Right.
Illinois was probably right there with them. But you did have 3 other teams, at least, that seemed to be jockeying for those 2 slots. And you had UConn, who a lot of people thought were close to a 1-seed. I don't agree with that, honestly. I think they were a little overvalued. But then you had Houston and Iowa State from the Big 12. They were also both, finishing very strong and obviously very, had very good resumes. So, I thought one of those teams was going to be the odd man out, and you were going to have those, the other 4 were going to be on the 2 line. But then, of course, Friday happens. Illinois loses an overtime game to Wisconsin. And it's like, oh, that could be trouble, especially since some of their results metrics were not as good. Their resume just wasn't quite as strong, quantitatively as some of those other teams. And I'm like, oh, they probably are down to 3. And then, of course, the Spartans, have the misfortune of not playing defense at all against UCLA. It's not really misfortune. But so then they lose. And then you're like, oh, well, I think they're probably still a 2-seed. But then, Iowa State finishes strong, and you have Houston making it all the way to the Big 12 championship game. And then UConn crashes out, but, well, I guess they didn't lose until they faced St. John's in the Big East final. But, a lot of people had them, again, closer to the 1-seed than the 3. So you figure, well, what's going to happen? And the more I started looking at the numbers, at first I'm like, no, I think MSU is going to hold on to that 2-seed. And, just based on some geography, the West is almost certainly where they're going to wind up. Not everyone quite saw it like that, but I mean, geography is a big
No, I think Jonah
was
right
factor.
there with you on that, like on Friday night, Saturday. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, some people were like, oh, UConn's going to be in the West. And I'm like, why would they send them to the West if they could send them to the East, which is way closer to home? That's what the committee does. And like, they didn't have Houston in the South. No, that's going to happen. And then Iowa State, pretty close to Chicago. It's not that hard to figure out sometimes. But because that's they do try to keep teams close to home. So, and if you're the weakest 2, guess what? You get shipped away from home.
Right.
So I was ready for that. But then the more I looked at Purdue's resume and as they beat UCLA and, you start looking, it's like, Purdue's kind of ahead of MSU in, both the predictive metrics like KenPom that generally correlates to like point spreads, but they're also a little better in some of the results-based metrics too, which is, the strength of resume. So, even before they beat Michigan, I'm like, I don't know, Purdue might actually make that jump, even though they were, they're kind of struggling down the stretch and grab that 2-seed. And that's what wound up happening. Now, the surprising thing is that a lot of people have argued, and I think with a lot of merit, that the selection committee kind of stops paying attention around Friday night, maybe Saturday noon, and just like locks it down and I don't know, they sleep in on Sunday. I don't know what they're doing.
No, that's something we had absolutely talked about, just the 2 of us. Like, I don't think really like game results after Friday night are going to matter too much.
Yeah. And I mean, that's always it's so hard to predict because, honestly, they have enough time. It's not that difficult to rebracket. It's really not. I did it in like an hour or less just with myself. But I don't have to do it by committee where I have to agree with everybody. So maybe that's why it's faster. But what I think actually did happen, though, just based on something that the chairman of the selection committee said, is he was basically implying that the result of when Purdue beat Michigan, that they got that seed. But if the committee will publish the official seed list where they rank everybody from 1 to 68. And I think Purdue was number 8, Michigan State was number 9. So you got the weakest 2, the strongest 3. It's really easy to switch those 2 teams if they're in the same conference because you don't have to worry about, weird rematches or anything, generally speaking. So I think that's what they did. They're just like, well, if Purdue wins, we'll put them in the West. If Michigan wins, we'll put MSU in the West. So I think that's how it went down. If I had to guess.
Yeah, I remember when watching the Michigan game yesterday afternoon. I texted in our family chat and I said, I have a feeling that Michigan winning is actually better for Michigan State's selection chances at being a 2 seed. And so it was like this, do we want Purdue to win and beat Michigan, or do we want Michigan to win and Michigan State maybe to hold on
and I think
to
I
that
know the
2
answer
seed?
to that. At least for me anyway, maybe for Paul too.
I think, that's a great point. When the selection committee chair came on the show and basically said that outright, that Purdue was the 11 overall seed ahead of that game and bumped up to 8 after that win. Looking at Michigan State at the 9, Michigan State was probably that last 2 seed up until the last results of the college basketball season before the selection show, which just shows you, I don't know, again, this year it negatively affected Michigan State, where they did seem to take the Big Ten championship into account. But in years past, it hasn't seemed like they've done that, especially in years where Michigan State has won the Big Ten championship and maybe thought they deserved a 1 seed, but then remained a 2 seed despite winning that game.
Yeah, I mean, I think that generally the results on Sunday especially matter. If you have a team that wasn't going to get in that then wins a conference tournament, then they have to do something. They have to have a contingency bracket, I would assume. Or in the situation as we just described, where you can kind of swap 2 teams without it impacting the bracket. Like the classic example, and I guess I'm going farther back than I'd like to admit, but in 2012, Michigan State and Ohio State went down to the wire. I think they might have tied for the Big Ten championship. Actually, Ohio State upset MSU in Breslin the last game of the season. I think kept MSU from winning an outright title. And that was one of those years where the Big Ten tournament really mattered because it was like the rubber match between those teams. And MSU wound up winning the Big Ten title over Ohio State, and they wound up getting the number 1 seed out west, I believe. And I think Ohio State had a 2 seed somewhere else. So I think that was another situation where it's like, well, the winner goes here, the loser goes here, and it doesn't really matter. But that's pretty rare, honestly. I mean, it's not super rare. It's not like a 16 upsetting a 1, but it does happen from time to time. But I think that's the unique situation that you need for that late of a result to really matter.
That makes sense. I hadn't thought about them being within the same conference. It makes it a lot easier for them to just swap them without it affecting a lot of other teams. Yeah. And I think it's helpful to talk through this, thinking back to our last episode with Anthony Garbert, or at the Real Shardy on Twitter. He was just talking a lot. We were getting into the results-based metrics versus predictive analytics. And on the one hand, what did Purdue finish in the conference?
7th.
They were the 7th seed.
What was their record?
I think
this is why I'm asking.
13-7.
Okay, so you think about it on the one hand, right? Of Purdue was 13-7 in conference play. Michigan State was 15-5, and Michigan State won the only head-to-head matchup against Purdue at Purdue. And so if you're looking at things from more of that kind of I hesitate to call it old school, but kind of just purely results based. These teams played each other, and this was the result. You kind of look at that and go, "What? Purdue's ahead of Michigan State." But I think what you said so key is when you actually look at all of the things that the committee's looking at, which is the WAB and the DPI and KenPom, all those things, it makes sense that they edged Michigan State out of that 2 seed spot. And like you said, if Michigan State had played any semblance of defense on Friday night, it could have been a very different story come Selection Sunday.
The thing is that as I was thinking about the potential draws, I actually prefer the draw in the East more than the draw in the West. But I think it's close. I mean, if you look at the potential paths in the West, I mean, Purdue now the first round, we're going to assume that anybody a 4 seed or below should get by. You never know, but this year especially, it's looking pretty good for those higher seeded teams. But Purdue's got potential second round match with Miami or Missouri, again a 7-10. They should get that. But if we get to the Sweet 16 round, they get Gonzaga or BYU, and I think Gonzaga. I think Gonzaga's vulnerable. I think usually they come in a little bit of an unknown quantity, but I mean, they played Michigan once and lost by 40. So,
right.
That tells you something. Now, they're probably still a solid basketball team, I'm sure, but, Purdue will be pretty favored to win that, I would assume. And I think Michigan State would be as well, or at least it would be no worse than a toss-up. But then you got Arizona, and I think Arizona is pretty good. So, and also you have to go out to San Jose, which, if you're interested in potentially covering the game, as I am, on a Thursday, that's kind of a pain in the butt. So I'm really not losing sleep that I don't potentially have to make that decision.
Yes.
Whereas in the East, and again, the first 2 rounds, we'll talk about Louisville here in a little bit, but if you look at the top seeds in that bracket, UConn, frankly, has not impressed me in the last month or two, and they just seem to be kind of dragging to the finish line. And if you look at some of the predictive metrics, if those 2 teams do meet, Michigan State might be favored, straight up. So that's a better situation than, frankly, Houston or Iowa State. I don't want to see either of those 2 teams. So that's not bad. And then if you think about Duke, now, if you look at the predictive metrics like KenPom, Duke is the best team in the country. But that's before their point guard got hurt, or before their center is maybe less than 100% going into the tournament. So, if you look at this bracket, there's opportunity for the Spartans. I think this was a good draw. They get to stay fairly close to home in D.C. I think it'll have a better fan presence, and I have a better chance of going, which makes me happy. So that's really all I care about,
I love
honestly.
it. Yes. A little bit of ulterior motive there, which is always a good thing for sure. Yeah, I think my immediate reaction is, one, are you kidding me? They put us with Duke again. Like, how many times do we have to be in the same region as Duke? And 2, just looking at like how many blue blood teams are in the East. I mean, it's a little bit insane. But I do think when you actually, like, that's that immediate, like, are you kidding me? They put us with all these teams. But then you break it down and kind of look at some of these other paths. And at some point, like, and that's just how the NCAA tournament's going to go. Like, you're always going to be, rubbing elbows with a team that you really don't want to have to see. And I think there's the potential, and this is just my purely vibes based, like the potential for some of these other lower seeded teams to knock off some of the higher seeded teams in the East compared to maybe some of the other regions. What are your thoughts on that? Like, I'm seeing maybe a little St. John's Duke upset in my bracket, but I don't know if that's a good one or not.
Well, I mean, I think St. John's is a little undervalued. I think I had them as a 4. I actually, a lot of people have this experience. I had like my best year of bracketology ever, which I think many people correctly ascribe to. The committee actually did a competent job this year for the first time maybe in my lifetime. So
way
good
to go,
for them.
Committee.
But yeah, I had St. John's actually. I think St. John's will beat Kansas. I really do. In that sort of 4-5 match, if both teams make it that far. And, again, with Duke and their health situation, I think they are vulnerable. I mean, you even look at a team like Ohio State that's, potentially lined up with the Blue Devils in the second round. I mean, that's a tough team. And they could, I mean, they came pretty close to beating Michigan, too. So, you could see some upsets there. And then if you look at the bottom half of the bracket, I mean, probably the first round upset's probably not so likely, but South Florida, Louisville, who knows? I don't know a lot about Louisville, but I hear that they're kind of erratic. So
I think that's a great word to describe them, from my understanding as well.
I see they shoot a lot of threes, which I don't necessarily care for, because it just seems like you roll the dice, you don't always win. So that'll be an interesting potential matchup, and of course MSU's got to get by North Dakota State. I mean, the thing is, if you look at the potential for upsets across pretty much all the seed lines, I think we're going to see something a little bit similar to last year, if not a little bit less exciting, honestly.
Interesting.
This has come out in a couple different ways, but like the point spreads for like the top 4 seed lines are like higher than they've ever been, and the predictive metrics agree with that. So the odds of an upset, like a 3-14 matchup looks a lot more like a 2-15 matchup in years past. And even the 5 seeds all look pretty safe, which I was kind of shocked when I looked at. So you could see some, but an average first round of the NCAA tournament has about 8.5 average upsets, and that's even a 9/8, so those count too. Okay. But last year when I ran,
you're saying the whole tournament or just the first round?
The first round.
First round, sorry.
First round,
okay.
Lower seed beating a higher seed, 8.5. Last year when I did some simulations, it told me that it was going to be 7. It actually was exactly 7. This year it's projected to be 6 only.
Wow.
Okay.
So,
see, these are really helpful things for me as I'm filling out my bracket, because sometimes I think so many of us want to root for the underdog and feel like, oh man, you've got like this gut feeling of like, oh, there's got to be this many upsets or whatever. But as I was filling out my bracket, I was kind of like, man, I'm going chalk with a lot of these, and it like almost makes me feel icky. But then hearing that, and I think we talked with Matt Sheehan about this too on an earlier episode of just how much separation there was last year between kind of the 1 seeds and everybody else. And then this year, how there's that same separation, but then kind of, again, like a lot of the 2 and 3 seeds separation above everybody else. And so it does make a lot of sense. Like you said, there's like these gaps in the seedings getting wider and wider every year.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess we could talk about the reasons for that. I don't necessarily, you could blame the transfer portal, you could blame NIL.
Right.
There's probably some truth to that. Is it just kind of a weird cyclical thing? It could be that as well.
Right. And I guess I shouldn't say year after year. It's kind of just been the trend last year and this year. And
the last 2.
How that'll shake up next year. Yeah.
And I think the year before that actually was pretty chaotic. So,
yes.
I think last year was this perfect storm where, the sort of baseline metrics said it was going to be a little bit of a down year for upsets. And then I think just, by happenstance, it was really a down year for upsets.
Yeah.
So I would expect a little bit of a regression to the mean, especially in the later rounds this year. But we'll see. But I did want to get back to the East region just briefly, because actually the thing that made my heart kind of skip a beat when I saw the bracket come out was number 7 seed UCLA sitting there as a potential Sweet 16 match. I'm like, oh, I don't want to see
that's just rude.
I don't want to see those guys again.
Just rude.
Yeah, I was upset when I saw that, but I'll get over it. But yeah, I think there was unfortunately not a lot of other options there that the committee could really do. They could have well, no, that's not true. They could have put St. Mary's College in there instead. That would have been okay. But the other options, they kind of had to go somewhere.
It seemed like the committee was maybe wanting like a few potential conference tournament like rematches, right? Isn't there a possible Florida Vanderbilt rematch like in the Sweet 16? Like there was somewhere I was just like, this feels a little targeted at things right now.
Yeah, but the problem there was and I think that in theory Nebraska will win that game, right? They won't actually. Vanderbilt's going to win that one. And there's only so much they could do, especially when for the SEC they had Alabama, Arkansas, and Vanderbilt were like all clustered together. I had a hard time trying to figure where to put those teams, and they're all on the 4-5 line. So like all 3 of those teams are going to necessarily have a Sweet 16 matchup with a 1 seed potentially. So you probably could have split them up a little bit better. And now that I look at it, they probably should have swapped Vanderbilt and St. John's, because they put St. John's in the same bracket as UConn, which they're both in the Big East. They're not supposed to do that, even though they're a 5 seed. That shouldn't happen. So, as much praise as I gave the selection committee earlier.
See, that's another one, right? The St. John's UConn match rematch potentially. I mean, again, it would be way down the road. But
it'd be the regional final, but like they shouldn't be in the same region. Like that's weird. Of course, they sent them out to San Diego for the first weekend, so good luck with that.
Yeah.
Especially in the Big East, where we have 3 teams, opposed to the SEC, where you have 10. So it's a lot harder to separate those SEC teams than it is the Big East teams. And like you said, maybe you switch one of those SEC teams in for St. John's, it kind of fixes a lot of those rematch issues and kind of separates those teams in the conferences a little bit more.
Yeah, I hadn't noticed that till this long.
A whole weird rabbit trail now, though. So, Paul, maybe take us through, talking about the East region, what you think Michigan State's likelihood for, one, North Dakota State is not a guaranteed game. I'm always going to be careful about that going into the tournament, right? Like, even if there's big separation between that 3 and 14 seed, like, we got to get through that game.
Yes.
But, looking past that even, like, what are your thoughts on Michigan State's path to Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four? What are you thinking?
Oh, excuse me. Well, I can give you the exact numbers if you'd like.
I would love it.
Because I am able to, I can actually calculate the exact odds based on the projected point spreads.
Dr. Green and White, everyone.
That's right. So actually, the MSU has a 94% chance to win that first game. And I think
like
that point spread
That's
is...
a nice percentage.
Yeah, it's right around 20 points, as I recall. I'm trying to find that number.
I think last I heard today, somewhere like 16 and a half.
I think that sounds right.
Betting Vegas.
It's on DraftKings right now. It's 16 and a half.
Okay.
Oh, okay. That must be what correlates. I mean, it generally the odds I calculate wind up being within a point or two of the point spread, because that's just
That makes sense.
Because I think the Vegas folks use very similar methodologies to derive those numbers. And then as far as the potential second round match, I have MSU with a 60% chance of getting to the Sweet 16. Now the tricky part about Louisville,
I don't like that one as much.
yeah, Louisville is actually one of the better 6 seeds.
Yeah.
They're not quite as good as Tennessee, but they're a lot better than BYU or North Carolina. So that's a little bit of a tricky matchup that could wind up, limiting MSU a little bit. I don't, as I say, I've not seen Louisville play, so I don't know much about them. I hear they're erratic, but then again, so is MSU. So I think a lot of this does come down to what version of the Spartans we see.
Right. Who shows up that night? Yeah.
Because, the UCLA effort ain't going to get it done. But, if they play like they did at Purdue or at Indiana or at home against Illinois, well, then we're talking. So
Yes.
I think that really might make a bigger difference. Because I think if MSU's really locked in on the defensive end, then it's, a different ball game. So then they can be competitive with anybody. But
Well, I know earlier, Paul, you talked about not loving, the teams that live and die by the 3, and I think Louisville has one of the highest 3-point attempt rates in the country.
Yes.
4th, I think, in the country, and then they also are shooting the 3 ball pretty well. I think it's 35.7%, something like that. And I think I always get hesitant about those teams because on the one hand, it's they could get hot and go off, and as Michigan State has seen in their last 2 matchups, guarding that perimeter 3 has been pretty challenging for us. But on the other hand, if they're cold, that makes the path so much easier for Michigan State. And so it really is so erratic. What are your thoughts on those live by the 3, die by the 3 kind of teams in March Madness?
I mean, anytime you see a team with high variance, you just feel like you're rolling the dice, and I don't like that.
Right.
Wisconsin could be described that way too. And,
yes.
We rolled snake eyes against them. So I don't know. That just makes me very nervous. But again, and also just with I think the current limitation on this MSU team is they're just one perimeter defender short of what they need to have. They need one other guard that could come in and play defense. And, Divine Ugochukwu was that guy. He played a lot better defense than what we realized until he was gone. Somebody like Trey Holloman.
Hey, I have been saying it all season, man.
So yeah, they make me nervous. But again, I do kind of wonder if the ACC is a little overrated this year. Duke is clearly very good. Virginia looks solid, but are the rest of those teams not quite as good? And then the other thing that I think is a bit of an advantage is that Louisville's got a fairly young head coach who's, I don't remember if they made the tournament last year, but he's fairly young in his career. And I think that going up against Izzo, that's a pretty significant advantage. There's a lot of teams, they'll even say before, until you see that fast break, blitz counter break or whatever you want to call it, where MSU will even run on a made basket. Until you actually see that in person, you don't really understand what it takes to stop.
Yeah.
Right.
And we've seen a lot of examples historically of, MSU struggling in the Big Ten because it's a slog and it's like a rock fight every game.
Yes.
And then they get into the tournament against teams that don't have as good of a scout against MSU, and we just mop the floor with them. So that could happen as well, at least until you get to UConn, potentially, or UCLA God help us, in that next round. So if MSU does make it into that Sweet 16 round, then I have a 34% chance of making the Elite Eight. So you got about 1 in 3 chance. And that takes into account the odds that they would beat UConn or that UConn would get upset before that.
Right.
So that's the overall odds that they would make the final, the regional final, basically.
And I'm sure those odds go up if you slot, what would it be, UCLA potentially in that game against them versus UConn being in that game. Okay.
Correct. So, in theory, yeah, MSU, well, we were about a 5.5 point favorite against UCLA last time, and we saw how that worked out. So, but again, UCLA could be banged up as well. Like Bilodeau went out against MSU, and then I think Donovan Dent was dinged up against Purdue. I don't know the status of either of those guys. So,
I don't think if anybody truly knows the status of either of them yet.
Yeah, and that's really a storyline throughout this region. I mean, you already mentioned Duke. You obviously just mentioned UCLA, but then also Louisville, their second leading scorer, Michael Brown, also missed the ACC tournament with a back injury. And it seemed kind of optimistic that he would be back for the NCAA tournament, but also back injuries are kind of ones that tend to linger
it's probably gonna
quite
keep
a bit.
nagging you.
And especially too if your team and a player that relies on shooting. I have to think that back injury could definitely play a factor into Louisville's performance. Whereas you have Michigan State, they have injuries to Divine Okuchukwu, but no injuries
Knock
that
on
are kind
wood.
of question marks at this point. You kind of
Everyone's been okay so
right.
far.
So it could be definitely a factor that benefits Michigan State, kind of pending how some of the healthy of these other teams look come this weekend.
Yeah. That will definitely be a factor, and it makes, injuries are not factored into these numbers at all because the computers aren't that smart yet. So, but as far as MSU advancing past that, so right now I have the odds of MSU making a Final Four at 11.5%. So, 12%.
Okay.
So
You're
it is what it is.
It's not zero.
It's not zero, and that's honestly just looking at historical odds. That's about right for a 3 seed. Which is, and it's actually better odds than most of the other 3 seeds, which again I think that shows reflective of the bracket that they're in. And the other thing we should mention is that MSU actually has played UConn before. They played an exhibition game against them at the very, very beginning of the season, and it wasn't televised, and I don't think many people saw it.
Right.
They did lose that game, but as I recall, and I actually didn't see the game either, but it was a rough first half for the Spartans, but then they made a late charge and almost made it interesting late. So I think they showed that they can play with UConn. As I say, I think UConn's been fading as the season goes on. So that gives me some.
Well, and I think too, even I remember tuning into that game partly. I think we had gotten Big Ten Plus or whatever specifically just to watch that game, and the Spartan team that showed up that night was, almost unrecognizable compared to the Spartan team that showed up against Arkansas less than a month later. So I think it's always a little bit of a moot point, I think, whenever you're playing exhibition and those sorts of matchups. And I think maybe you could argue that in some ways Michigan State has just gotten stronger since they played UConn. Granted, there's been some the February Izzo struggles. And I don't know so much about UConn. Obviously, we're not UConn fans, so I haven't been following them super closely throughout the season. But like you said, they've kind of seemed to be limping through a little bit here at the end of the season.
I think one thing that makes March so fun is you have these models and kind of predictive measurements that are pretty good guidelines and kind of giving you a general idea of how the brackets are going to go and what matchups would kind of look like. But just something that you can't really calculate into that is just thinking about, you mentioned with Pat Kelsey not really having NCAA tournament experience. And you look out some of the other coaches in the East, like Izzo, like Pitino, like Bill Self, like Hurley, they have that experience. They know what it takes to win in March. Or also youth, maybe a player hasn't played at that stage yet, whereas Michigan State, they have veterans who have played deep into March before, and you look at these matchups and you can't really quantify how much that's really going to affect these games. So at the end of the day, that's just, I think, what makes March so fun is just that unpredictable nature and just some of those X factors that you can't really quantify on like a metric. And that's what I think it just excites me about, especially like this year. Like you look at like Michigan State and timers are like, this is an experienced team, made the Elite Eight last year with a coach who's made 8 Final Fours. So for those, and you have, I feel like, relatively good odds for a 3 seed to make the Final Four. And then, I mean, it's hard not to be optimistic this time of year as Michigan State fans because we've seen it so much.
Unless you're a girl in my family, and then we're just nihilistic all the time.
That's true.
Everything is terrible.
Think positively, Abby.
I know. I'm working on it. It's an active process over here. But I think that's the fun of it too, exactly like you're saying. And even with the numbers, right? It's like becomes a game of like, okay, cool. There's probably going to be 6 or 7 first round upsets, but what ones, right? And like you could have a 10 over a 7 seed, but if you don't have the right one, like there goes your bracket. And I think that's just like so fun.
Yeah.
So speaking of upsets, and maybe hopefully I'm not moving on too quickly.
That's okay.
What are your, and I mean, I don't want you to like give away all your bracket secrets. So, keep whatever cards close to your chest that you need to, but what upsets are you liking in maybe the first or second round right now?
Well, if I look at the usual metrics that I use, and I think I've mentioned this before, but like the general concept is basically you try to forecast what the spread is, and you look at the spread relative to what it is historically. And I mentioned earlier that especially for like the 16, 15, 14, 13 seeds, those teams are way bigger underdogs than usual. And so, I don't really expect anything, at that level. I mean, you might see one upset. I mean, and even in a normal year, seeing one upset.
Are you telling me that UMBC isn't going to do the upset over Michigan?
I think
I'm really clinging to that, Paul.
I will just say this. If that does happen, I think we have definitive proof that God exists and he loves us.
Yes. Golden retrievers over Wolverines
I
all
can't
day, every day, baby.
Explain it any other way. But, I mean, if I'm looking at that 4 seed line, I think Hofstra over Bama is maybe the most likely. And I'm kind of liking Cal Baptist over Kansas too, right? That would be the 2 most likely of those top 4 seed lines to get knocked out. I'm probably just going to go chalk in those. It is hard because I hate doing that because it's just not fun. But that would be the 2 that I would look at. But I mean, even so.
What are your thoughts on an early Nebraska exit?
That is not a bad call because I think Nebraska's got some bad mojo. Like they've been kind of fading towards the end of the season. Historically, Nebraska has struggled. Would you like to, and Jonah probably knows this, I don't know. Do you know how many lifetime victories Nebraska has in the NCAA tournament over the entire span of their program?
Oh, gosh. No, I don't. Probably not a lot. You probably do know.
I think it's a goose egg.
What's that, Jonah?
I think it's a goose egg.
That is correct. It is 0. The answer is 0.
Yeah.
Nebraska has never won an NCAA tournament game. And that does create some pressure, right? But I will say that, and this must be because of Troy's metrics, Nebraska is actually the number 4 seed that's the biggest favorite. So they have a 95% chance of winning, which is more like a 2 seed first round. So
I was going to say.
I wouldn't expect it, but, the Huskers could always choke. It's possible. Also looking at this,
not like my bracket.
Yeah,
you would not approve of my bracket. You'd be like, Abby, what are you doing over here?
Just because I know what the numbers doesn't mean the numbers always don't lead me astray.
Fair.
I will say, and I'm just noticing this now that MSU is actually the most likely 3 seed to lose, but we'll just pretend I didn't say that.
Yeah, I'm gonna edit that part.
Yeah, just go ahead and edit that part out. But and of course I say Hofstra's got a reasonable, they're the most likely, but they still have less than a 15% chance to win that. So, buyer beware. But then if we start looking at the less, the less exciting upsets, the 5-12, that classic 5-12. Honestly, those, as I say, all the 5 seeds look pretty safe to me. But if you were going to pick one, I would take Akron over Texas Tech. That's the
Okay.
that's sitting at an 80% likelihood for Texas Tech, which is way higher than the 65% you usually see at that seed combo.
Texas Tech is also dealing with a big loss, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Injury-wise, one of their guards, right?
Yeah, their top forward was, I think, was an All-American last year, at least preseason All-American this year. JT Toppin is out.
Okay.
When you look at some of these, especially like a spread via like Ken Palm numbers, obviously like he's been injured for a couple weeks now, so their numbers have reflected or like changed because of that. But really, I mean, their Ken Palm is still reflecting the whole season. So is it fair to say like that spread might not totally be like taking into full account an injury like that? Or do you, I mean, probably Vegas knows how to adjust that the way that can be taken into account?
I would think that spread should fairly accurately reflect that the real situation on the ground. I mean, I'm seeing that, the spread is 7.5 at 77%. So I got to find it on my. The spread's actually down a little bit. So the numbers that I was quoting were from Ken Palm, and the actual spread's a little bit lower than that. Actually, Nebraska's a little bit lower than what I said. It looks like the spread has them at more 90% chance to win as opposed to 95. So I think that if you were to compare Ken Palm to the spread, and as I say, in general, it's close within a couple points, but those teams that have some injuries look like the spread is shaded a little bit below what Ken Palm would predict, which would make sense. I mean, that's just logical. But speaking of injuries, as we move down to the 6-11 matchups, I do see a couple that would actually, ping my sort of normal flags to indicate a potential upset alert, an upset watch perhaps, not a warning, just a watch. Two of them actually. So BYU that plays one of the play-in winners, either Texas or NC State. I have NC State winning that game. I don't think NC State should have been in the play-in round. I do have NC State beating BYU. And then I have VCU potentially upsetting UNC. And I believe both BYU and UNC I think BYU is dealing with an injury situation, or at least...
I think one of their top players was kind of hurt in February, so they've been dealing with that for a month or so now. Yeah.
So those are actually two of them. I mean, as far as anything that's not on the 8-9 line, those are the two juiciest looking upsets. About 60% odds for the favorite to win in both of those.
Okay.
7-10 line.
For a 6-11.
Yeah, 6-11s aren't they? Usually about 50% anyway, so it's kind of... the 7-10 matchups, the 7s look pretty good. The weakest, the one that could be the most interesting there is actually Santa Clara versus Kentucky. Could be a little closer. That's the one I would go with there.
Don't tell my brother-in-law that.
I work with a UK fan too. He's sad.
We've had to learn how to love him and put up with him.
Yeah. And then finally on the 8-9 line, as far as first round upsets go, there's two games where actually the 9 seed is favored. And so I would take both of those. Usually the 8-9 games, it makes the most sense just to go with the Vegas spread. It's as good as anything. And that's Utah State over Villanova and Iowa, our friends Iowa, against Clemson. So I would take those two upsets as well.
Gotcha. No, that's really interesting. And I wonder, this is more, just your opinion based off of March Madness. Like, we were actually having kind of this talk in our Spartans Illustrated kind of group chat earlier, I think today, whereas in tournaments where you have these, or have fewer upsets in the first round, tends to kind of make some more intriguing matchups in the later rounds. I'm curious your opinion. Like, obviously, I think everybody would say that upsets are fun, but then sometimes I feel like so second round games or Sweet 16 games can be less interesting because
everything goes chalk from there on out.
Right. Well, you have Kentucky maybe playing a mid-major in the Sweet 16 or whatever. It doesn't have as much intrigue as when top seeds are playing. So would you prefer more chaos in the first round, or would you prefer more maybe some higher end matchups in the later rounds?
Well, there's two parts of that statement that I'll address. So as far as which I would prefer, I think I still just love the chaos in the first round because, when a team like Hofstra, upsets, who did I say that they might upset? I forget who that
was. Alabama.
Alabama.
Yeah.
That would be amazing. That would be so fun. So, watching those mid to low majors pull an upset, that's just what March Madness is about. So I wouldn't really trade that necessarily for anything. But I do think your other point is perfectly valid, that if you do get a lot of upsets in the first round, it tends to water down the second round. And actually there's an effect that is kind of been proven mathematically, so to speak, that I used to, in fact, still do call the law of the conservation of upsets, which means that if you have more upsets in the first round, you tend to have less in the second round, and vice versa. And the reason, again, is exactly what you would imagine, that like if a weaker team wins in the first round, more likely than not, they're not going to be able to make it into the Sweet 16, so they're going to get picked off. So that is a real thing, basically, and it's for exactly the reasons I just discussed. So I still think first round upsets are fun. It does water down the second round, though. So,
yeah, I mean those Loyola Chicago and even UCLA deep runs are Wichita State, right? The Shockers one. You're like, those deep runs are just so rare for those lower seeded teams. And I think, again, as we've talked about, as there's more separation between 1, 2, 3, 4 seeds and the rest of the field, the less upsets I think you see later on if you see upsets early, right? I would think that would just keep reinforcing itself.
One thing that's interesting to me, and maybe what I'm hoping for in this tournament, with kind of those spreads for those higher seeds being larger than in most years historically, is I think, though, you have some of these lower seeds where they've kind of been there before. So maybe that belief, and maybe some of them were further removed from when they had an upset before. But you have a team like McNeese State, who I think was a 12 seed last year and beat a 5.
Yeah.
Is a 12 again this year. You have Furman, who I think was a 14 seed a couple years ago, knocked off Virginia, is back playing UConn. Obviously UMBC, the first ever 16 seed to win, is back in the tournament against Michigan. So I'm kind of hoping some of that confidence and belief from some of those teams can give us a few more upsets than maybe is what's predicted based off of kind of the separation that we're seeing between some of these teams.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly could be true. I mean, you do have to wonder at some point how much kind of institutional knowledge is there, so to speak, either with the coaches or the players. And I think even with McNeese State, that's the coach. I forget which job that he wound up taking. But
he's at NC State now.
That's right. He's at NC State. Will Wade, right?
Yep.
Who used to be at LSU. So this is his second run at the high majors. So. And also, just as a sidebar, we have you can't have the NCAA tournament without Fran McCaffrey and his Penn Quakers that did qualify for the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and match up against the Big Ten team in Illinois, so that's also kind of an interesting matchup. He's familiar with Illinois, and
that's great.
Yeah,
that's just
probably
wonderful.
the two of the hottest coaches. I feel like in the Big Ten from years past, you got Brad Underwood and Fran McCaffrey.
Interesting.
Could be a pretty interesting matchup there to see which coach is more fired up and testy.
That's just great. I didn't realize that until you just pointed that out. So that just makes my day. That's great.
I love it.
Yeah. So, trying to think of what else we wanted to talk about.
I'm curious.
Sorry.
When you're thinking about filling out your bracket this year, typically, you got to have some form of separation or variance from the norm in order to potentially be at that top tier of bracket in your kind of pool.
I need you to put that into English for me.
So,
I think I know where you're going, but
my little word brain non-numbers.
Usually, especially in a year like this where it might be more chalk.
Okay.
It's the person who had that one team going on a deep run, correct, who's going to have a better shot at winning their pool. So thinking about the 1 seeds and the top 2 seeds, most likely probably filling in the final 4. I wonder if you have any teams in mind, maybe not on the top 2 lines, that could be a good pick to put in your final 4 kind of give you that separation against other brackets to help you win you that pool?
Yes, and I will also give a little bit of additional
Thank you for rephrasing it for me.
potentially advice as far as how many, like what the Final Four makeup should usually look like. And of course, last year we had all 1 seeds, which was only the second time that that's happened in history.
Yeah, it was crazy.
And so that's actually pretty rare. So, but I do have ways through simulation to kind of to look at how many are likely to make it, and actually, we're only based on the numbers that I ran, about roughly 2 is what I would expect to see. So,
okay,
and actually, there's a 70% chance that the second highest seed will be a 2. But there's only a 30% chance that you'll get more than 2 3 seeds or 1 seed into the Final Four. So, a general rule of thumb is a Final Four is usually roughly 2 1 seeds, then maybe a 3rd seed, and then somebody else. And that could be another 2, it could be a 3 seed or lower. Historically, that's what the Final Four actually looks like. Mm-hmm. But then it's, of course, the trick of picking, which one of those teams are going to make it.
Right.
That's challenging. So I think
I know both for myself and Paul what 1 seed won't be in our final.
Oh, yes, of course. The team that shall not be spoken.
Yes. UMBC, man.
That's right, UMBC or Howard. That's a play-in game actually. UMBC's got to play their way into the.
That's true. That's true. I just love them so much. I want it. I want it so bad. I was really hoping UMBC wouldn't have to have a play-in game, but
yeah. Well, the other fun thing about that is that both the Spartans and the Wolverines will be in Buffalo. And so there is a scenario where UMBC pulls an upset over the Wolverines with a stadium that's a quarter full of Michigan State fans.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Just
think
how does that work? Because they're not in the same region.
Well, they are. They're both in Buffalo.
Well, the first weekend, the pods... you could be in any pod. It's not necessarily linked to the region you're in. Yep, it's more focused on.
How do you guys keep all this straight? My
how
goodness.
close you are.
Whew.
Just
that's tough.
Years and years of study.
That's why you got the doctor, right?
That's right. So
earned that title.
All right. So as I look through the different regions and I kind of see who some of the sleeper teams might be, I'll start with the West because that's at the top of my spreadsheet. Honestly, Arizona looks pretty solid to make the Final Four to me. Like, as I look down that seed list, obviously Purdue or Gonzaga could potentially do it. But, I'm going to say Wisconsin because we've seen Wisconsin do some scary things to some good teams.
Yeah.
So, they're the type of, I believe the quote I had the other day is that, they're going to be an agent of chaos and they're going to ruin somebody's day. It's just a question of who and when. So
100%.
And they've got good guard play, and good guard play is, what you need in March. So I do like Arizona to win the West, but my sleeper would be Wisconsin.
Okay.
Now the South, Florida is statistically the weakest 1 seed, and it's actually not that close. They're quite a bit farther behind the other 3. And they also have the toughest 2 seed in Houston. So that region could be a dogfight. I'm probably not going to take Florida to the Final Four. For better or for worse, your mileage may vary. The team that actually my math would give a strong indication to put up there is Illinois. Now, do I have faith that Illinois is going to make the Final Four? No, I don't. But
Interesting.
They're a 3 seed, but yeah, they have a 23% chance to make the Final Four, which is 11 percentage points higher than it should be for a 3 seed.
Yeah,
crazy.
wow, that's high.
So, because Illinois, their
does
Ken
that
Palm's
reflect
really
them
high.
being good or just that region being weak?
No, it's them being good, and by good I mean they have good Ken Palm efficiency, which may or may not reflect reality.
Right.
So, but they do have, Wagler's a really strong guard. They've got Boswell, who's also a good defender. So, and they've got size.
Very experienced, yeah.
I could see it, but it would force me to put Illinois in the Final Four, which I don't think's happened since 2005. So
I think you're right. Yeah,
that's a tough one. But maybe I'll say Illinois is the sleeper Final Four team because that's what the math says, and maybe it'll be right one of these years. So then looking at the Midwest region, obviously Michigan is the favorite to make it to the final four here. They've got about a 50-50 shot, but that means they got a 50% chance that they won't make it.
Yeah, I like the way you think, Paul.
So, I mean, if I'm gonna pick two number one seeds objectively to make it and knock the other two out, I would probably take Michigan and Arizona, just because I think Duke is banged up and Florida's gonna stumble. But what fun is that? But I do think the one disadvantage that Michigan has is on some level a similar problem to what the Spartans have, which is that the guard play is maybe not quite up to snuff. I've been saying that about Michigan's roster construction since October, that it doesn't look like they upgraded their guard positions. And yeah, they got good size, they got quality big men, but you can't win in March without guard play. And, to their credit, I think their guards have played a lot better than expected across the board. It's like they rolled Yahtzee at every position and every question mark that they had, which, sometimes that happens. Unless there's switchcraft involved, which I'm not ruling out.
Never.
So, but I do think Michigan is vulnerable, especially with the injury to Cole.
LJ Kaysen.
Kaysen, there we go. I pulled about 3 other Wolverine players out of my.
No, I love it. Well, and maybe Axel with the low ankles.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe Michigan's a little banged up, and I mean, honestly, they almost got beat 3 times in the Big Ten tournament, not just once.
Yeah.
So
if Wisconsin had just played defense for the last 2 possessions.
Yeah.
Anyway, Agents of Chaos.
Agents of Chaos. So, but I do like Iowa State in that bracket. I think they're very tough. So they're obviously the biggest challenger as the 2 seed. But as I look at other teams that maybe have a little better chance than we thought, is Tennessee, actually. So the 6th seed would be sort of my sleeper team in that bracket that could potentially rise up and bite somebody. But then you got Rick Barnes, and you're picking Rick Barnes. He's still there, right? I think he's still there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rick Barnes in the Final Four, he's kind of allergic to it. So that's the counterpoint there. And then finally we come to the East. Of course, Michigan State's bracket. Who would be the sleeper team here? I do think MSU has a really, really solid chance. As I say, as a 3 seed, just objectively, their odds are, about average for a 3 seed, which this year is actually above average. So I think MSU would be a potentially good pick there. But my second sleeper team, which no one listening to this is going to like, is actually Louisville, because their odds are also a little bit better than expected for a 6 seed. So that potential second round game between the Spartans and the Cardinal, could that be for the Final Four? Probably not, but at least I have some mathematical charts that tell me that maybe. And And the thing that would be interesting, so I think within my group of sleepers, I have 2 6 seeds, Tennessee and Louisville. I believe a 6 seed has not made the Final Four since like the 80s. It's been a really long time, which statistically is really weird. All of the other seeds have made Final Fours around them, 7s, 5s, 4s, but a 6 hasn't made it in forever. And so if a 6 seed were to make it this year, that would be pretty interesting. So that's just a little...
No, that's a good point.
This is where I just don't understand math. I don't understand numbers. It's like, how can that be, right? How can 5, 7, whatever seed make it,
random.
and then you have 50 years of
and then you have, it seems
crazy.
like every 2 to 3 years you have an 11 seed in the Final Four.
Yeah, it's just bizarro.
It's just a statistical anomaly.
Yeah. Those things feel like holes in my brain. But maybe that's just me. Oh man, Dr. Glean and White, thank you so much for taking us through all of your work. I can't even explain to our listeners enough how much time and energy goes into you working through all of these things for the Spartans Illustrated community, not just, these sorts of equations or even the NCAA tournament, but even all the predictors you were making for the Big Ten tournament and then how that influences NCAA tournament. And we are just so spoiled to have you and to know you. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of your knowledge with us. And if you end up taking any of these, little upsets bracket picks, maybe post a picture of your bracket, share it with us, share it with Dr. Glean and White. We would love to kind of see what you guys are all doing. And this is also your reminder to go on over to Spartans Illustrated Twitter page or wherever, it might even be on the site, and join the Nudge Printing Spartans Illustrated Bracket Challenge. There's $500 worth of prizes. It's going to be super fun, just Spartan community I think it's free to join. Make sure you don't miss it. We'll try to link it down below in the episode too. Paul, I assume you're going to be jumping in there. You're going to be a tough opponent in that bracket league.
I will. I have not actually filled out my bracket yet. I take a good 48 hours to let everything kind of soak in. So I haven't
gotta let it marinate.
Made my picks yet. Like I usually I do my write up, which I'll be putting on Spartans Illustrated here in the next day or so, as soon as I write it. But it'll be sharing a lot of the data and insights that I talked about today. I usually go through that process and then I start actually making my picks. But
makes sense.
Well, I can't wait.
But I did just check something, and in fact, the last number 6 seed to make the Final Four was the University of Michigan in 1992. So,
Interesting. Over 30 years ago.
It's been a long time.
Crazy.
I don't want to speculate if either of you were alive when that happened, but
we'll keep that to ourselves.
Yeah, just please do, because I definitely was. I was in high school. Thank you very much.
I love it.
We definitely weren't not in high school. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can probably deduce that.
I can probably guess.
Oh man, I love it. Well, Paul, we always like to end our episodes with our guests. Go green.
Go white.
Let's go state.